Welcome to Specific Love. Sometimes we like to take our dog with us whenever we go on trips, but she's getting older and it's getting harder and harder for her to get in and out of the vehicle. So for this video, I show you a great way to make a 3-in-1 travel box for your dog that not only will help her get in the car, but it's great storage and a nice platform for her to lay on. Let's begin. I first started off with a piece of 3/4 inch pine plywood. Now I do sometimes overbuild my projects, and this might be one of them. So keep in mind that if you have a medium to small dog, you could probably use 1/2 inch or maybe even 1/4 inch plywood. Now using a long level and some clamps, I made a straight edge so that I could cut the wood easily with a circular saw. The first cut was set to the width of the box, which allowed me to trim the top, bottom, and back from this first piece. I then cut a strip which provided both of the sides. At this point, I grabbed my pocket hole jig and made several holes. I then added a layer of glue and clamped it in place with a corner square before screwing it secure. Now using a simple butt joint may not be the strongest or the prettiest, but keep in mind this is for a dog when traveling, not for my living room. And there's a good chance it will get abused anyway. Then at this point I realized I needed some pocket holes to connect the bottom. Unfortunately, it was not too late. I then double checked the sizing and measured out where I needed some slots for the drawer legs. The drawer needs 2 legs in the front to keep it from rocking forward when the dog steps on it. So I'll first use a Forstner bit to make the initial holes and cut the remaining area out with a jigsaw. I then measured out a center slot that almost reached the full depth of the box. This will be for a basic drawer guide and stop. And for this setup, I used a 1/2 inch drill bit to create the ending points and then again used the jigsaw to cut out the slot. The slot may not be perfectly straight, but it will work for this box. I then gave the frame one more test fit before adding a layer of glue and securing it in place with several screws. Since the box was going to have a step about halfway down on one side, the top section needed a base so it can be used as a storage area. So I cut out another piece of wood to fit in the middle, but it was just a hair wide. I could have recut this, but instead I grabbed my hand plane and removed a few small shavings which allowed it to slide into place. And keeping with the theme, I grabbed the pocket hole jig to add several needed locations. It was now time to add the front wall, which was a simple measure, cut, glue, and screw with, you guessed it, more pocket screws. Now if you've not noticed yet, I am trying to keep all of my screws on the inside to give it a cleaner look. This is not the strongest way to secure them, but it should work for our needs. And with a quick test fit of the lid, it was starting to look more complete. It was now time to build the drawer, so I grabbed a few measurements and cut out the base. This can be built out of thinner stock, but I kept using a 3/4 inch because I already had it on hand. I then cut down 2 more pieces that added up to the same depth. These will be the top of the step, but also a lid access to a second storage area. I then cut out the sides, making sure to leave about a 1/4 inch of clearance of space to allow for hinges on the top. And again, adding some pocket holes was a chosen method. I really do like this joinery technique for quick, simple projects. I also added some glue to ensure the drawer would have plenty of strength. Next up was adding the hinges, but I quickly realized that the clearance I left before was just a bit too small. So I needed to flip them upside down for this to work. And to do that, I needed to notch out an area on one of the boards. And with a little work from a hammer and a chisel, the spacing was perfect. I then lined them up, marked the holes, pre-drilled them, and added the screws, making sure to hand turn the last amount to prevent them from stripping out. To hold the lid in place, I just lined it up and added 3 screws in the back board. I thought about using glue, but I wanted an option of modifying it later. At this point, the drawer worked great, but it was a little difficult to pull out, so I reached for a D-ring hanger, which is normally used on picture frames, because it is small and swings out of the way. I thought about attaching it to the top and even under the flap, but ultimately the best location for the most balanced pull was on the center of the front plate. Now moving back to the top lid, I really wanted to attach it with some hinges, but the lid did not want to sit flat. So I measured the positions and made a few sizing marks on the back. And with the combination of a coping saw and a Dremel tool, I was able to cut out the notch. Now this did produce a bunch of smoke and made everything in my shop smell burnt, so you might want to consider another option if you do this. I then used a hand file to smooth it out and to make a small angle on the outside for the hinges to sit flush. And before the lid was attached, I used a palm router to go around all of the sharp edges to help prevent any injuries or damage to the vehicle. And before putting up the router, I used it on the rest of the box as well, along with some sandpaper. I then marked the hinges, drilled the holes, and secured them in place. Now for the legs of the front drawer, I decided to cut down a round dowel that was scavenged from some old broken furniture. These only needed to be the thickness of the bottom of the frame, so that the drawer would be about level when it was pulled out. I then drilled a center hole all the way through each foot, along with a countersink, so that I could attach it to the bottom with a short screw. This will allow for easy replacement as they wear out over time. To make this box easier to pick up, I decided to add a couple of handles using some of the leftover plywood. I cut them to about 4 inches wide, which works well with my hands, and then sanded all of the edges to reduce splinters. And since I was working with a thin piece of wood, it is a good idea to pre-drill all of the holes along with countersinking before adding the screws. At this point, the box was looking a little plain, so I decided to add some cherry stain to really make the wood grain stand out. And the finished product looked amazing. I then flipped the box onto its back and added a stop screw to the bottom of the drawer. This will allow the drawer to move freely in and out without the concern of it falling out. The setup will also allow for uneven pavement, allowing the drawer to move slightly to either side or up and down to compensate. Now to prevent the dog from slipping on the smooth wood, I grabbed some slip-resistant strips from a local store. These have an adhesive backing which makes them easy to measure out and attach, even over the tops of the hinges. I also used a round pipe to help ensure they were flattened completely. The strips not only adhered well, but I was surprised about how much they improved the appearance of the box. I then took the box out to the car to make sure it would fit at the door and behind the seat, and it looked great in both locations. And then it was time for the ultimate test. Bring on the dog. And of course she was a little nervous at first, but after a few tries, she was a pro at using it. She's a little nervous. No. Back up. Girl. Step in the car. Right here, Molly. Right here. Right here. Right here. It'll hold you. It'll hold you, girl. Come on. Come here. Right here. Right here. Right here. Come on. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, come on. Come on. Up and out. Come on. The top lid made for easy access to store away her leash and her toys. Plus the added platform extends the size of the seat so that she could have much more area to lay down. And to help with the comfort of a long ride, a simple rug or comforter thrown on top of the box works well. I really think she will love this addition to our long trips. Now if you enjoyed this project, make sure you click the like button. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. And as always, have fun building. Good girl.